Some large pieces of the Challenger are being found and recovered in the Atlantic now as the nation prepares to join a president-led memorial to the 7 on the mission. South Africa's Botha suggests a swap, freedom for Mandela and freedom for Sharansky and Sakharov.
This is Daybreak on CNN for Friday, January 31st, with Reed Collins in Washington and Molly McCoy and Patrick Greenlaw in Atlanta.
Good morning. The sun is up and the search is resumed for more pieces of the shattered shuttle Challenger off the Florida coastline. A search which has begun to yield large, identifiable pieces of that spacecraft. CNN's Al Sunshine joins us now live from the Kennedy Space Center. Al?
Reed, the 4th day of recovery efforts off the waters of the Kennedy Space Center have begun. Throughout the night, the ships have been standing by. They are loaded down with much of the debris that's already been pulled up. Debris that has been identified is coming from the shuttle orbiter Challenger. Throughout the night, they've been in position. We're expecting today that NASA recovery teams will include divers that will go down in the water. Sasha Fu reports that much of the materials coming up will provide vital clues to have NASA try to figure out what happened to cause the tragedy.
Close to midnight last night, a Coast Guard cutter steamed into Port Canaveral, bringing the pieces of wreckage that may throw more light on why the shuttle exploded. 5 large chunks of debris were recovered, the largest piece about 20 by 8 feet. NASA called the size and the condition of the pieces surprising. Parts of the shuttle fuselage were found. They include what is believed to be parts of the Challenger's nose and cabin, portions of a cargo bay door, and sections of wing. After being unloaded, the wreckage was taken to a military warehouse, storing several thousand other pounds of debris. Of that collection, this latest haul is considered the most significant. Searchers plan to return to the area north of the Cape, where the largest chunks were retrieved. Several other large segments have been detected underwater by sonar, and divers will scour that area in search of more debris. Sasha Fu, CNN.
With us now is Lieutenant Commander Jim Simpson of the Coast Guard. Commander, at this point, what can you tell us about recovery efforts today?
Well, there'll be 2 separate efforts, really. On the surface search for floating items, we'll cover 6,800 square miles, extending 60 miles north and south and 90 miles out to sea. And then also, divers will go down and try and identify the large object on the bottom of the ocean in the same area where the fuselage parts were recovered yesterday.
What indication do you have that sections of the cockpit may have been located?
There were some pieces floated up that the Coast Guard people looked at and said, well, that looks like it might have come from the cockpit, but any kind of identification like that has got to be made by the NASA people ashore.
How has the location of the recovery area changed at all over the past several days?
Well, the search area for floating objects has drifted slightly north each day. And of course, the search for items on the bottom won't have that same effect.
And what kind of information are you getting from the ships out there about how much material remains out there?
Well, they still say, as of sunset yesterday, that there's quite a bit of material. Now, the aircraft will get up this morning and we'll get a better idea of what might still be there today.
How long do you think it's going to take to recover it all?
Well, I don't think we'll ever get all of it, but we will search as long as there seem to be items floating that we can recover that'll be of any use to NASA.
Is there any indication whether they have found any areas where the crew may have been in the orbiter itself?
No, I don't have any indication on that.
Okay. Now, to just show you and to give you a better explanation of what has come out of the water so far, this is a NASA model of a space shuttle orbiter. This would be a model then of what Challenger essentially looked like at launch. This would be the fuselage, these would be the wings, this would be the tail section, these would be the engines. In much of the video that we have seen that has been recovered lately, we are seeing sections with a dark paint on it, a lighter paint, and an arrow that would say for emergency use or for rescue. That would be right in this section of the shuttle. So you can see that these parts have been identified by NASA officials at this point, and that since they expect that there are some other large areas of debris in that same area, if it went down in pieces and broke up at that location, they may also expect to find the wings. They've already apparently recovered a section of the tail, and that will provide some vital information into what happened. Reed?
Thank you, Al. Some 15,000 mourners are expected to gather near Houston, Texas today, where President Reagan will lead us in tribute to the Challenger 7. CNN's Frank Seltzers had been at the Johnson Space Center and monitoring the preparations. Frank?
Well, Reed, the preparations have been going on throughout the night. And right now, workers are busy doing the last-minute touches on the area, the mall area behind the administration building here at the Johnson Space Center. There has been no rain, but the humidity in Houston is quite heavy, being near the Gulf of Mexico, so they were actually blowing off, using an air blower to get the water off the chairs. And they had some workers out there with paper towels, drying all of them. And they'll probably do that one more time before all the dignitaries and invited guests actually arrive to make sure that everything is in proper form. They've built a platform for the president and several platforms for the media so that this event can be covered. Ground has been covered with a green carpet, I guess to assure uniformity so that you don't see the sidewalks going through. But everything is in preparation over at the mall area. They're expecting between 10 and 15,000 people for the service today, which will begin about 12:30 Eastern time, is when CNN's coverage will pick up. About 12:30 Eastern time. The service, we're told right now, to begin about 12:40 Eastern time. But this will be a service will be open for NASA families, for people who work here at the Johnson Space Center, the contractors, the people who helped to build the shuttle, and then the invited dignitaries. And we will be carrying that event live. Reed?
Thank you, Frank. Molly?
It is now 7 minutes past the hour. President Reagan spoke of the Challenger tragedy during remarks at a conservative political dinner in Washington last night. CNN's Charles Bierbauer reports.
At the Conservative Political Action Conference, there was a moment of silence for the 7 astronauts.
May we pause for a moment of silence?
And the president repeated his commitment to NASA's manned space program.
Other brave Americans must go now where they so valiantly tried to lead. A fitting place, I've always thought, for Americans, the stars and beyond.
But the president also used this moment and his conservative audience to take a shot at the Soviet Union.
Some closed societies, a tragedy of this sort would be permanently disheartening. A fatal setback to any such program, followed not by mourning and national recommitment, but by attempts to evade responsibility. Well, not so in a democracy, not so in America.
It's half past the hour now, and here's a look at the top stories. NASA officials are studying some large chunks of the fuselage from the Space Shuttle Challenger now. The pieces that include part of the cabin, the cargo bay door, nose, and sections of the wing were pulled from the Atlantic late yesterday. Investigators believe some other large pieces of debris are on the bottom, and it may be searched for off the Florida coast today. At the Johnson Space Center in Houston, meanwhile, the final preparations are underway for today's memorial service to honor the 7 Challenger astronauts. President Reagan and his wife, Nancy, will attend this ceremony and are scheduled to meet with the families of the victims. CNN will be carrying these events in Houston live. Our coverage.
The astronauts of the Shuttle Challenger will be remembered at a memorial service today in Houston. At Florida's Kennedy Space Center, NASA employees are going about their work, but remembering the men and women who gave their lives. CNN's Larry Lamont reports.
The pictures on the wall show members of Betty McNaughton's family. She is not related to them, but after almost 7 years as an employee of NASA, has developed a motherly affection for those dedicated to space. That is why the shuttle tragedy has shaken her very soul.
Just like family.
McNaughton has especially strong feelings for astronaut Ellison Onizuka, who was aboard the Challenger.
He loved children. He helped the Little Leagues here when he was here. I had the pleasure of being at a luau that Ellison was at a couple of years ago, and he was busy helping all the kids that were there and having a good time. He's just one of the finest people I've ever known. And we miss him. We miss him.
Well, this is breakfast.
Oh, this is breakfast? Some NASA employees hide their feelings behind hard work, but their close ties bring emotions to the surface very quickly.
It's like losing, part of your family. I mean, we didn't know them on a first-name basis, but our whole daily life is to support these people.
Estelle Coleman has been with NASA for 24 years. Other veterans of the program share her feelings, even those who have never met any of the astronauts.
I feel like all astronauts are just closely related to each other and to each person out here. Anybody has anything to do with the space program. But you just feel like you've lost a good friend, whether they knew you or not.
For many who work here, the space program and those who ride the rockets are bigger than life. And the death of Challenger has evoked bigger than life emotions.
But I think that any time you have people who are the elite of the country, that we have, you know, really raised up to that point and who have really gained that point, when we lose people like that, they're very difficult to replace. America's had a great loss.
If it had to happen to them, they went the way they wanted to go.
Members of the NASA family are brokenhearted, but none plan to surrender to grief. They feel it wouldn't be fair to those they love. Larry Lamont, CNN, the Kennedy Space Center.
Recognizable pieces of the Space Shuttle Challenger are located and retrieved from the Atlantic Ocean as the Johnson Space Center prepares to honor the shuttle's crew.
This is Daywatch on CNN for Friday, January 31st. With Reed Collins in Washington, Mary Ann Laughlin and Bob Kane in Atlanta, and Jeannie Mose in New York.
What may be the largest tribute to the fallen crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger will take place near Houston, Texas today. President and Mrs. Reagan departed the White House bound for Houston just a few minutes ago. There, Mr. Reagan will join an expected 15,000 mourners at the Johnson Space Center memorial service. And here in Washington last evening, at a dinner of the nation's conservative leaders, the president joined in a minute of silence for the Challenger 7, and then he went on to praise the crew as heroes.
Each of us is in their debt, and we know now that God holds them close, and we pray he'll comfort their grieving loved ones. And we're aware, too, of our own duty to them and to their memory. We must continue. Other brave Americans must go now where they so valiantly tried to lead. A fitting place, I've always thought, for Americans, the stars and beyond.
President Reagan will deliver the eulogy at the Houston Memorial Service. Our CNN coverage to get underway in 3 hours. Coast Guard cutters, Navy ships, helicopters too continue their search off the Florida coast now, having retrieved some of the Challenger itself last night. Sonar is being used to scan the ocean's floor, but officials agree this is going to be tough. The Atlantic, just off the Space Center's coast, is littered with the hulks of rockets launched over the years. It is called the missile graveyard of the world. And those spent missiles may confound even the most sophisticated sonar. CNN's Bill Nelson takes a look at what has been found so far in this search for clues.
Shortly before midnight, the recovery ship Dallas returned to Port Canaveral with the most significant find in 3 days. The twisted pieces of debris were hoisted off the Dallas by crane and loaded onto a flatbed truck. Several more pieces have been detected by sonar lying on the ocean floor, and one of those, again, is said to be large. At the Patrick Air Force Station, a piece of human bone and tissue is being examined by base hospital doctors. Those remains washed ashore at a point 50 miles south of the Kennedy Space Center, and they were turned over to police by a local resident. While souvenir hunters risked hampering the investigation into the Challenger explosion, NASA announced that it has called in the help of veteran investigators.
The 51L Interim Mishap Investigation Board will be joined by several senior NTSB managers with broad experience in reconstructing aircraft accidents and their causes.
The investigating board spent the day studying TV tapes of the liftoff looking for clues, but they came up with nothing conclusive. Brian Nelson, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center.
CNN's Al Sunshine's at the Kennedy Space Center live this morning now and can update us on this morning's progress. Al?
Reed, the fourth day of shuttle recovery efforts off the waters of Cape Canaveral has already been a busy one. The boats of the Coast Guard and the Navy have been stationed on position off of the Kennedy Space Center overnight. We're told by Coast Guard spokesmen that they are loaded down with thousands and thousands of pounds of debris. Most of it is expected to be from the orbiter of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And as it was brought into the dock last night and even this morning, large sections of debris lay scattered all over the docks of Port Canaveral. Now, one thing that has to be noted is that the NASA experts are still going over this debris at this time. There's some question exactly what it is, how the bits and pieces are going to fit together to indicate where off the orbiter exactly these pieces came from. Many of the pieces that we saw appear to be control panels. coming possibly from the wings of the orbiter, possibly from the tail section. Again, the experts are going to have to go through those materials very, very closely. They're going to be transferred from where they are now at Patrick Air Force Base to the Kennedy Space Center, where many of the interim review board members and NASA engineers will go through them. Now, this morning, the Coast Guard cutters that had been carrying much of that material through the night slowly made their way back to Port Canaveral. They will be unloading through the morning. They will be bringing in even more material, expected to provide NASA engineers with more clues of exactly what caused the tragedy to the Space Shuttle Challenger. With me now is a small model of the orbiter of Challenger, and to just try to give you a better perspective on how many of the pieces looked before the explosion. The bottom of the orbiter, black, is covered with heat shielding tiles. In the pictures that you saw, many of the tiles that were brought out were large sections. They were blackened by the blast. If they were black before the explosion, they would have come from the bottom of the orbiter itself. These would be the control panel sections here on the tail. These would be the wings of the orbiter. These also have very large heat shielding tiles that would normally be white that appear in the early pictures of the material brought off that this is what it could be. Also, we saw the lower section of what appears to be the orbiter's fuselage. The Coast Guard and NASA confirm that they do believe they do have the lower section of the fuselage. That would be this bottom area of the orbiter itself. One of the pictures clearly show an arrow with a rescue sign on it, and that would be right here at the rear of the space shuttle in this section here. And again, Coast Guard spokesmen are saying that they have some very, very significant sonar soundings underwater of some large objects, and they're hoping that they will be recovering even more of the materials that were destroyed when Challenger exploded. Reed?
Al, the Gulf Stream sweeps very close to the Florida coastline there. Is the search centered in one place, or is it moving?
Reed, from what I was told by the Coast Guard this morning, depending on how far off the coast you go, the Gulf Stream either moves debris southerly very close to the coast, and as you get further out, the Gulf Stream moves debris to the north. Because much of the shuttle wreckage of the orbiter itself was found some 50 to 90 miles off the shore in the Daytona Beach area now, they do believe that the ocean currents would carry those debris and those materials northerly. So that's why at this point, the area that they are focusing their search on for more wreckage of the orbiter itself, including possibly more clues into what happened to the cockpit in the areas where the astronauts are, they apparently believe that it may be drifting in a northerly direction now.
All right, Al, are they getting a larger search, or do they have enough boats and ships and help out there?
Reed, at this point, from what I'm being told, the search area itself is still about 7,000 square miles, 6,800 square miles. They are moving it en masse, basically the parameters of that search from where it had been for the past several days in a northerly direction. We are told that at least one submarine is going to be involved in the search. A NASA underwater recovery crew has moved in. At this point, there is literally a small flotilla of rescue ships, aircraft, helicopters, divers that are on the scene.
Thank you, Al. Sunshine live at the Kennedy Space Center. Marianne?
Reed Edwards Air Force Base in California has been the site of 18 shuttle landings, and most of the base personnel have been involved in the program. So the brief ceremony there to honor the Challenger crew seemed to honor one of Edwards' own, as CNN's Ann McDermott reports.
They began arriving early at the small military chapel, which soon overflowed as hundreds wanted to show how much they cared.
You really had grown to just get used to the idea, and when this happened, it was just a very unexpected and just could not believe what had happened.
They were representing us, you know, up in space, so I felt very strongly about what happened.
I have a tough time explaining to my children why they didn't come back, why it happened.
Services like this are familiar to people at Edwards Air Force Base because death is. Some of the best test pilots in the world have trained here, and many of them have died here.
Onward I've climbed and joined.
So, if there were few tears, it may be because these people have learned to accept death. But that doesn't mean they don't hurt. Some new Challenger crew members, Ellison, Onizuka, and Francis Scobee, Edwards had been a stopping point along their careers. And the Challenger craft itself was a frequent, friendly visitor at the base. But there seemed to be another bond present, tying these stoical men and women to Challenger's last crew, a willingness to try something difficult, something daring.
We thank you. Michael and Francis, Ronald and Ellison, Christa, Gregory, and Judith, for you. Because of you, our world is a better place.
It was just a short ceremony, but there was still the last goodbye to watch. A farewell to 7 brave flyers. Ann McDermott, CNN, Edwards Air Force Base, California.
School children in Los Angeles will remember the shuttle crew today. Most of the metro area's 1.2 million students will observe a minute of silence in memory of the 7 who died aboard Challenger.
The shuttle disaster struck a chord in the hearts of people around the world, and many of them are showing it with flowers. Flowers are pouring into Johnson Space Center in memory of the Challenger crew. Florists in the Houston area have been flooded with orders.
We've had Brownie troops call. We have orders from King Hussein, from Jordan, from other countries. Just everyone in the United States is concerned.
Many of the floral arrangements are enormous, some laced with exotic blooms, some cost thousands of dollars. But one florist says she is most touched by the single red roses ordered anonymously.
Students and teachers at Christa McAuliffe's alma mater remembered the space teacher yesterday as a pioneer who wanted to reach for the stars. McAuliffe's parents, Grace and Edward Corrigan, made their first public appearance at the memorial service since their daughter perished in a ball of fire over the Atlantic on Tuesday. They joined the faculty and students of Massachusetts Framingham State College in the singing of America the Beautiful. Mourners asked God to forever hold McAuliffe in the palm of his hand. Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis was at the service and expressed his sentiments.
The same terrible feeling, the same awful hole in my stomach, the same waves of emotion over and over again, the kinds of emotion that we all feel.
Following the memorial service, students released 7 black balloons, 1 for each member of the Challenger crew, and watched silently as they drifted toward the skies.
Recovery ships have harvested thousands of pounds of debris from the ocean off Cape Canaveral, but whether there is a clue to what happened to the Space Shuttle Challenger remains unknown. Challenger was traveling at nearly 2,000 miles an hour when it blew up. The fragments of the space vehicle are scattered over 800 square miles of ocean. So far, shreds of the vehicle's outer skin and a few badly twisted bits of structural frame have been recovered. Most of the debris comes from pieces coated with insulating material that allowed the fragments to float. The Soviet Union is saying that the shuttle disaster points up the danger of America's Strategic Defense Initiative, better known as Star Wars. CNN's Meade Jorgensen has more.
A columnist for the Communist Party newspaper Pravda said the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was risking human lives for the sake of profit. The front page article in Friday's edition said NASA was rushing the shuttle launching because it needed money. The commentator said NASA officials gave numerous interviews before the shuttle flight solely for advertising purposes. He said space is not the place for amateurs, and that the teacher, Christa McAuliffe, was on board the shuttle as a publicity gimmick. The article said the accident was a setback for the Strategic Defense Initiative. In the reporter's words, regrettably, it is not SDI, but 7 astronauts that have become the main victims in the disaster. The Soviet media have been linking the shuttle accident to possible future accidents involving SDI. The government newspaper Izvestia on Thursday said a malfunction in SDI could cause a nuclear catastrophe. Izvestia also quoted NASA officials warning Florida residents to stay away from a mysterious green canister that may be found in the shuttle debris. The article says touching it could cause instant death, and the purpose and contents of the canister were not revealed. Meade Jorgensen, CNN, Moscow.
President and Mrs. Reagan will be at a memorial service for the 7 Challenger astronauts in Houston later today. The president is expected to urge that the space program press forward despite the tragedy. The memorial will take place at the Johnson Space Flight Center, which has been the headquarters for all of the man in space programs. The president will meet privately with family members before the public memorial. CNN will have live coverage of the observance beginning at noon Eastern time. That will be 9 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast.
What's being called the
Edwards Air Force Base in California had been a landing spot for the Shuttle Challenger before this week's tragedy, and the base had been a training ground for 2 members of Challenger's crew. So church services held there yesterday at the base chapel may have been especially heartfelt by those who attended. Afterwards, there was a final tribute to the Challenger 7. Some of the best test pilots in the world have come through Edwards, where a daring life and a tragic death are accepted by many there as the price of progress. You know, besides a memorial service at Johnson Space Center, President Reagan will be speaking at today. Other tributes to the Challenger astronauts go on nationwide. In Los Angeles, most of the city's 1 million school children will observe a minute of silence. And there will be a memorial service for the astronauts at Annapolis. Tomorrow, there will be a memorial service at Florida's Kennedy Space Center.
And those memorials for the Challenger crew continue with a community service in New Hampshire at 6 Eastern Time tonight. And at approximately 12:40 Eastern Time, the President will eulogize this shuttle crew at the Space Center in Houston. President Reagan sent a special message of condolence to Christa McAuliffe's students and colleagues at Concord High School. It will be read at a service there this afternoon. McAuliffe's death Tuesday brought learning to a halt at the New Hampshire school. Classes resumed yesterday. The principal described the mood as extremely somber, saying you could hear pins drop all over the place. Students were asked if they wanted a NASA official at the memorial today, and one girl answered, "No, I don't think I could cry in front of NASA." McAuliffe's parents made their first public appearance yesterday since their daughter perished in a ball of fire over the Atlantic. Edward and Grace Corrigan joined students and teachers in remembering McAuliffe at Massachusetts Framingham College. McAuliffe graduated from Framingham in 1970. Students listened silently as she was described as an inspiration to all. Mourners asked God to forever hold McAuliffe in the palm of his hand.
Air Force One carrying President Reagan to memorial services for the shuttle astronauts is set to touch down in Houston about an hour and a half from now.
And that memorial service, after meeting with family, members of the Challenger 7, the memorial service will be for the family as well as former and present astronauts. And CNN's Jeff Flock is standing by live there with more on that memorial service. Jeff?
Yes, preparations are just about complete here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center for President Reagan's visit, and preparations for that memorial just about complete as well. It will be a private memorial service, but there will be about 11,000 people here. Among them, in addition to the President and Mrs. Reagan, about 20 to 25 senators, 70 members of the House of Representatives, and the rest people that knew the shuttle astronauts perhaps best, the people that worked with them here at NASA. There are about 3,000 employees here at NASA at the Johnson Space Center. And they will all be here at the service today. There will be the employees of the contracting companies, the people that built Challenger, that built the shuttle mock-up that you see behind me. Those employees will also be attending the service, about 11,000 people. In addition, of course, the family members. 5 of the 7 shuttle astronauts lived here in the Houston area, were known here, were loved here. Their families will be here, in addition to families coming from out of town. Christa McAuliffe's husband will be here as well. President Reagan will be meeting with them. Then he'll have something to say at ceremonies. The acting administrator of NASA, William Graham, will also speak. And to conclude it, there will be a flyby by an Air Force flyby in the missing man formation. And that will be the conclusion of it. CNN's live coverage of the ceremonies here will begin at noon Eastern Time. That's 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Jeff Flock, CNN Live at the Johnson Space Center.
Recovery crews are pulling in more pieces of the Space Shuttle Challenger. A black and white chunk of the shuttle's nose section was brought to shore today. Searchers also recovered large, twisted fragments of the fuselage, wing control flaps, and what appears to be a tail section.
As that search continues in Florida, final preparations are underway in Texas for a memorial service. We have 2 live reports. Tony Clark is standing by at Johnson Space Center, and Al Sunshine joins us now from Kennedy Space Center. Al?
Well, the situation here is simply that the unloading efforts for the Coast Guard ships that are searching for space shuttle wreckage are continuing at this hour. They are accelerating. Since last night, many of those Coast Guard vessels have been literally loaded with tons of debris from the Space Shuttle Challenger. Much of the debris they've been finding over the past several hours has been much larger than what NASA had originally expected. Many of those large pieces are, as had been mentioned earlier, expected to be wing panels, possibly even the tail section of Challenger's orbiter. Now, NASA officials at this point say they are surprised that they are finding larger pieces of the orbiter, and they are now hopeful that possibly the crew quarters, that is a separate pod inside the orbiter, may be recovered off the floor of the ocean. Coast Guard representatives here have said that they've searched by sonar, and they have located several large objects underwater. A Navy submersible is in the area. However, it has not been able to get into the water because the currents near the cape where the wreckage is now located is considered to be a bit too strong. Now, to give you a little perspective on the pieces that are being found, what they look like before the explosion, this is a model of a shuttle orbiter. These would be the wing panels, this would be the tail section, this would be the cockpit. At this point, they believe they're finding parts of the fuselage, which would be right down in here. The bottom section's got dark heat shielding tiles, and much of the tiles that they have picked up have been black. It's not known yet whether they were blackened by the explosion or if they are the pieces of the tile itself. The crew quarter pod would be right in here, and NASA is hoping that because they've picked up so many bigger pieces that that pod may be intact. And the efforts are going to continue today, throughout the day, very accelerated, trying to pick up more parts of the Challenger. Tony Clark is standing by with a live report on memorial services that are about to begin in Houston.
Al, the crowd started gathering here hours and hours ago. As you can see, the dignitaries behind me are filing in for the ceremony. It is outside the Johnson Space Center. This is a private ceremony for employees of the Johnson Space Center. As we have been saying for days, they take all this very personally here. Everyone is much like a family at the Johnson Space Center, and everyone seems to be coming here for this service. As you know, President Reagan is on his way here. Several family members. He is going to meet with several family members as soon as he arrives here at the Johnson Space Center. They'll be meeting back in Building 16 behind me and then come out together for the service. What you will see in a couple of hours from now, starting at about 11:40 Central Time, there will be some musical interludes. President Reagan will speak for about 15 minutes. America the Beautiful will be sung, but perhaps aside from the president's remarks, one of the most moving scenes will be at the end when some of the Johnson Space Center pilots will fly overhead in T-38s. Those are the planes that the astronauts train in to train for the G-forces of launch. They will fly over in the missing pilot formation to close out this ceremony. As I said, the friends, the relatives of the 7 astronauts are here today. We will be seeing Ron McNair's wife and Christa McAuliffe's husband and Commander Smith, Mike Smith, the pilot of the shuttle. His wife is here. June Scobee, the wife of the shuttle commander. Marcia Jarvis, Greg Jarvis's wife. He was the Hughes technician that was on board to run experiments that were designed to make a new kind of satellite to be launched from the shuttle. And now what everyone here is waiting for is a ceremony, which we expect to be a very moving ceremony and kind of a catharsis to let go of the feelings that have been held in so long, this family feeling. This is indeed a meeting of the NASA family, and we will be bringing it to you live. This is Tony Clark at the Johnson Space Center.
All right, thank you, correspondent Tony Clark at Johnson Space Center and Al Sunshine at Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. Again, as Clark just pointed out, CNN will be bringing you live coverage of the memorial service today at Johnson Space Center beginning shortly after noon.
Well, hundreds watched in silence as 7 black balloons floated into the cloudless sky above Framingham State College. Students and teachers gathered at the college where Christa McAuliffe went to school to say goodbye to the space explorer. McAuliffe's parents came out of seclusion for the first time since their daughter perished in the skies over the Atlantic. Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis was at the memorial service and expressed his grief.
The same terrible feeling, the same awful hole in my stomach, the same waves of emotion over and over again, the kinds of emotion that we all feel.
Christa McAuliffe had been scheduled to give the college's commencement address in May.
The memorial service to be led by President Reagan at Johnson Space Center in Houston for the 7 astronauts who died aboard the Challenger shuttle is going to begin in just actually a matter of minutes from now. We'll be bringing you live coverage.
Of course, one of the astronauts who died, the first private citizen in space, Christa McAuliffe. And now we'll look at this woman who touched the nation.
Today I'm directing NASA to begin a search in all of our elementary and secondary schools and to choose as the first citizen passenger in the history of our space program one of America's finest, a teacher.
It's not often that a teacher is at a loss for words. I know my students wouldn't think so. I've made 9 wonderful friends over the last 2 weeks. It might be one body. But there's going to be 10 souls that I'm taking with me. Thank you.
That's great.
Everything frozen we have. Again. Again.
Yeah, looking up at the KU band antenna. See that dark thing there?
The big dish?
Yeah, that's what you'll be talking over.
Go ahead. Brave girl. Go ahead.
Don't have it so hard. Not so hard.
I would like to humanize the space age by giving a perspective from a non-astronaut, because I think the students will look at that and say, this is an ordinary person. This ordinary person is contributing to history, and if they can make that connection, then they're going to get excited about history, they're going to get excited about the future, they're going to get excited about space.
I think both of us feel that whatever the price in terms of readjustments or my taking on things that I probably should have been doing before anyway and hadn't done, whatever those prices are, they certainly pale in comparison to the opportunity.
We have ignition and liftoff of Challenger and the Spacelab D1 mission.
We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space.
Oh, it's beautiful!
Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue.
Our live coverage of the Johnson Space Center Memorial begins in just minutes from now. I'm Bob Kane.
I'm Marianne.
Today on Take Two, we'll join 15,000 relatives, officials, and other mourners at the memorial service for the crew of Space Shuttle Challenger. President Reagan will deliver the eulogy for the 5 men and 2 women who died Tuesday in an explosion that shattered the craft and stunned the nation. Our continuous coverage of the Shuttle Memorial Service, next on Take Two.
This is a CNN special report, the memorial service of the shuttle astronauts. Now, here are Dave Walker and Lois Hart in Atlanta.
Hello, everyone. The Johnson Space Center in Houston, scene of so many national triumphs, today takes on another emotion, grief.
Some 15,000 mourners there will hear the president deliver his eulogy for the Challenger 7. But many millions of Americans will be watching on television.
CNN's Charles Bierbauer and Tony Clark of our staff are in Houston, and we'll be talking to them in just a few minutes. But first, here's Steve Schatz with the latest details on the memorial service and other news. Steve?
Dave, the president's remarks in Houston are expected to echo the theme of his comments since the Challenger tragedy, that life goes on and so must the space program. Workers today prepared for the gathering in a grassy quadrangle where NASA often honors its triumphant astronauts. Besides addressing the memorial service, Mr. Reagan will also meet with relatives of the dead crew members. Another memorial is set for tomorrow in Florida at a site just a few miles from the shuttle's empty launch pad. Specialists are examining shuttle debris recovered from the Atlantic Ocean as NASA tries to find out why the Challenger blew up. Officials are surprised that so many large pieces survived Tuesday's fireball. Sonar has detected a very large metal object on the ocean floor, and divers are prepared to go down to take a look at it. A submarine has also joined the search effort. Coming up on Take Two, we'll have a live report from the Kennedy Space Center. Despite rumors and reports to the contrary, Haitian President Duvalier is apparently...
Thank you, Steve. And as we mentioned, CNN's Tony Clark is at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And Tony, I understand that the friends and family of the astronauts are starting...
Yes, Lois, right behind me. Just a short time ago, we started seeing the family members of the astronauts killed in Tuesday's tragedy arriving to Building 16 right here. It is on the mall area at the middle of the Johnson Space Center. It is a beautiful day out here, much unlike yesterday when fog and mist covered the area. The sun is shining. There is a pond off to our side. It is a beautiful scene out here. There are thousands, literally thousands of NASA employees here. They have come to pay respect to the men and women who gave their lives in the Space Shuttle Challenger. Everyone, as we have said so often, feels like a member of the family here. And they have come to the memorial service for their family. Everyone was standing in their seats as the band began playing and the family members started arriving. We have a host of dignitaries here. Of course, there are all of the astronauts are here. In many cases, astronauts have been assigned to the various family members. Former astronauts, Jake Garn, the senator who went into space, is here. Senator Ted Kennedy, John Kennedy Jr., Caroline Kennedy, Texas officials, and of course the
best we can do is remember our 7 astronauts, our Challenger 7. Remember them as they lived, bringing life and love and joy to those who knew them, and pride to a nation. Sometimes when we reach for the stars, we fall short, but we must pick ourselves up again and press on, despite the pain. Our nation is indeed fortunate that we can still draw on immense reservoirs of courage, character, and fortitude, that we're still blessed with heroes like those of the Space Shuttle Challenger.
It was the space community's turn today to say a final goodbye to the men and women who died on the Space Shuttle Challenger. President Reagan delivered the eulogy.
We come together today to mourn the loss of 7 brave Americans, to share the grief that we all feel, and perhaps in that sharing to find the strength to bear our sorrow and the courage to look for the seeds of hope. Our nation's loss is first a profound personal loss to the family, the loved ones of our shuttle astronauts. To those they left behind, the mothers, the fathers, the husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, yes, and especially the children. All of America stands beside you in time of sorrow. What we say today is only an inadequate expression of what we carry in our hearts. Words pale in the shadow of grief. They seem insufficient even to measure the brave sacrifice of those you loved and we so admired. Their truest testimony will not be in the words we speak, but in the way they led their lives and in the way they lost their lives, with dedication, honor, and an unquenchable desire to explore this mysterious and beautiful universe. The best we can do is remember our 7 astronauts, our Challenger 7. Remember them as they lived, bringing life and love and joy to those who knew them, and pride to a nation. We remember Dick Scobee, the commander who spoke the last words we heard from the Space Shuttle Challenger. We remember Michael Smith, who earned enough medals as a combat pilot to cover his chest. We remember Judith Resnik, known as JR to her friends, always smiling, always eager to make a contribution. We remember Ellison Onizuka, who was a child running barefoot through the coffee fields and macadamia groves of Hawaii, dreamed of someday traveling to the moon, who said that he learned perseverance in the cotton fields of South Carolina. His dream was to live aboard the space station. We remember Gregory Jarvis. On that ill-fated flight, he was carrying with him a flag of his university in Buffalo, New York. A small token, he said, to the people who unlocked his future. We remember Christa McAuliffe, who captured the imagination of the entire nation, inspiring us with her pluck, her restless spirit of discovery, A teacher not just to her students, but to an entire people. Dick, Mike, Judy, Elle, Ron, Greg, and Christa. Your families and your country. Mourn you. We bid you goodbye. We will never forget you. For those who knew you well and loved you, the pain will be deep and enduring. A nation, too, will long feel the loss of her 7 sons and daughters, her 7 good friends. We can find consolation only in faith, for we know in our hearts that you who flew so high and so proud now make your home beyond the stars, safe in God's promise of eternal life. May God bless you all and give you comfort in this difficult time.
Students at Christa McAuliffe's high school in Concord, New Hampshire have been comforted with special condolences from President Reagan at a private memorial service in the school gym. More than 1,000 students and alumni said a last goodbye to the teacher turned astronaut and her crewmates aboard the Shuttle Challenger. Mr. Reagan's message was read by Concord High's student body president. A community memorial service is planned in Concord this evening in front of the New Hampshire State House.
Searchers in the Atlantic recovered several large pieces of the Space Shuttle Challenger today. CNN's Al Sunshine has a live report from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
The rescue workers, the salvage workers out in the waters off the Kennedy Space Center are continuing at this hour to unload thousands of pounds of space shuttle debris fished out of the waters off Cape Canaveral. One point at the moment, even behind me, you can see a crane erecting scaffolding, getting ready for memorial services here at Kennedy Space Center. Those memorial services will be going on tomorrow. It's been a day of great deep feelings here for many of the NASA employees. They were able to watch live the ceremonies at the Johnson Space Center, and it's been an emotional day for the recovery crews as well.
We were very hurt. It was a very sad thing to watch it happen, but we have been so busy since the destruction of the Challenger that we really haven't had a whole lot of time to feel anything. I imagine it will probably hit my crew the hardest when the operation is over, the rescue and cleanup operation. Ever since the first day, we've been shuttling debris back and forth to the Trident base from ships at sea. It's very difficult to take on these parts. Each piece we bring on hurts a little more.
Now, the recovery efforts have been hampered a bit by some of the strong currents in the water. NASA hoped to get some divers underwater to begin mapping out the seabed to pick up some of the so-called large areas of wreckage that were picked up by sonar readings yesterday by Coast Guard surface effect ships. One problem, as we had mentioned earlier, is that strong currents are keeping those divers out of the area. They are now in the process of getting 2 underwater robots named Sprint and Scorpio, complete with underwater cameras, to go into the area, roughly about 100 feet of water, to try to determine exactly what some of the large wreckage parts are. And we've been informed that at least one of those underwater submarines, robotic submarines, is now presently at work. This is Al Sunshine reporting live at the Kennedy Space Center. Don?